You were never meant to awaken politely. The first trembling of real consciousness is not a flickering candle. It is a silent earthquake that rearranges every corridor of the heart. Yet it is not destruction, and certainly not exile. It is invitation, disguised as collapse, a hidden door opening behind the familiar wallpaper of your life. Remember the instant at a crowded table when the conversation died inside you even as your voice kept moving. The split second you heard yourself reciting a line written by someone else. That hush was the mythic drum calling you across the threshold, announcing that the ordinary world has expired and the adventure has already begun. We inherit a choreography of small talk, schedules, and screens, and we perform it until the body knows the steps better than the soul knows its own name. Each morning the alarm demands allegiance. Each night the algorithms sing lullabies of imitation. In between we barter fragments of attention, wearing smiles that do not belong to us, speaking words polished by centuries of caution. The machinery is efficient precisely because it is invisible, and you, who were born a constellation of wild possibilities, are taught to glide along the conveyor belt marked normal. But on some unguarded afternoon the engine stalls, and in the sudden quiet you hear the creak of the mask against your skin, realize the smile was welded there, and feel the ancient ache of unspoken stories press against your ribs. Joseph Campbell reminds us that every heroic tale begins when the familiar grows too small, when the walls of the ordinary world can no longer contain the immensity stirring within. The awakening is rude only if we insist on sleeping, otherwise it is mercy. To step back from the crowd is no act of rejection, no arrogant refusal of human warmth. It is the first bow to authenticity, the moment the inner sovereign recalls its forgotten throne. You are not leaving humanity behind. You are leaving the automaton behind, so that a truer humanity may surface. The paradox is simple. Distance is required for intimacy, silence is the prelude to honest speech, and solitude is the midwife of genuine belonging. So the hero within you opens a questioning eye and sees that the city lights mask the deeper stars, that applause can drown out a heartbeat, that speed can mimic aliveness while secretly embalming wonder. You notice how laughter can serve as camouflage, how ambition can become anesthesia, how agreement can be purchased with the soft currency of self-betrayal. With each revelation, another rivet pops from the armor, exposing skin to the raw air of possibility. And though the mind quivers, because the known, however cramped, always feels safer than the uncharted, you sense that retreat is no longer an option. The myth has found its protagonist, and the stage, once mistaken for the whole world, begins to rotate, revealing corridors that lead elsewhere. Detachment, then, is not withdrawal. It is realignment. It is the shepherd, calling the scattered senses back into the circle of the heart. It is the refusal to let the market price your dreams, the refusal to let old conversations colonize your future, the refusal to accept exile from your own interior kingdom. You step out of the neon into the night air, and for the first time, the silence does not accuse you of loneliness. It invites you to listen. The earth beneath your feet is no longer flooring, it is threshold. The wind against your face is no longer weather, it is messenger. And somewhere beyond the horizon, a dawn entirely different from morning is preparing its chorus. The call to adventure rarely arrives with trumpets. It whispers through the cracks, finds you in the grocery line staring at fruit as if it held a secret geometry, or in the sudden stillness between two subway stations, when the lights flicker, and you wonder whose life you are inhabiting. One day the whisper becomes a presence, and solitude stops feeling like deficiency and begins to feel like a ferry waiting at midnight for the passenger courageous enough to board. You notice that conversations echo even after they end, and the echo sounds hollow. You notice that plans written in confident ink blur when held up to the moonlight. You notice that the center you consulted for guidance was merely a compass painted on glass. To cross the first threshold is to accept that silence is not emptiness but apprenticeship, that the absence of applause is the birthplace of an unbribable voice. Campbell speaks of the liminal cave, where the hero sheds the final fragments of the old identity, stepping naked into the baptismal darkness before any new name can be spoken. When friends ask where you have been, you may not know how to answer, because language obeys habit, and habit has lost jurisdiction. You sit with yourself and hear cities of memories erupt, greet shadows you once exiled, trace scars you pretended were ornaments. The loneliness that once felt like a verdict softens into a spacious field where the soul can rehearse forgotten songs. Days stretch, clocks melt, and the mechanical rhythm of society fades beneath the deeper pulse of becoming. You begin to sense guides, a paragraph in a battered library book, a melody that refuses to fade, the patient gaze of a stranger who seems to recognize you. You keep walking, not forward exactly, but inward, and the landscape shifts. Streets resemble corridors, mirrors resemble portals, breath resembles prayer. The old self sends postcards of worry. Come back, the bills are due, the inbox is overflowing. Yet each plea feels more distant, as if addressed to someone who has already moved. If these words resonate, then perhaps you too are hovering at the river's edge, hearing the water call your secret name. I invite you, no, I welcome you, to step into this circle of travelers. Leave a trace of your passage in the comments, share the dream that keeps knocking. Subscribe not as a consumer of content but as a fellow voyager mapping the same night sky. Together, we can keep the fire lit while each of us ventures into the dark to meet ourselves. Trials arrive disguised as ordinary Tuesdays. A barista mispronounces your name, and suddenly the old ache of invisibility flares. A family dinner resurrects ancestral scripts. A late-night scroll through curated lives threatens to remask the wounds you have only just dared to expose. Campbell calls this the road of trials, the gauntlet where allies and enemies share the same face, where every shadow you refuse to greet grows teeth. You learn that the fiercest dragons guard not treasure but truth, that they shrink when named, that they vanish when embraced. Yet the learning is costly. There are mornings when doubt sits on your chest like cold iron, evenings when you question whether authenticity is worth the surrendered certainties, nights when you long for the comforting anesthesia of the assembly line. Keep moving. The labyrinth was never meant to imprison. It was designed to sculpt endurance, to distill longing into commitment. You may walk alone for what feels like lifetimes, but the path is lined with clandestine witnesses. The tree that bends just enough to shelter you from sudden rain, the stray lyric that drifts through an open window, the child who smiles as if recognizing a fellow conspirator in wonder. And then, without ceremony, connection happens. One conversation where masks stay on the table, one embrace where ribs remember their divine flexibility, one gaze where no translation is required. Such moments are rare as comet trails, but they prove the universe is fluent in authenticity. The gift of these encounters is not permanence but permission. They remind you that you are not insane for wanting depth, not arrogant for demanding honesty, not naive for believing that souls can meet without pre-written scripts. You carry the warmth of that proof into the next valley, and though the shadows still rise, they no longer monopolize the horizon. You begin to suspect that the ultimate companion is the self you once abandoned, now walking beside you with quiet courage. If your heart quickens at this possibility, if you feel seen even across this digital distance, then linger a moment longer. Whisper your story into the tapestry of comments. Let us weave a map of echoes. Subscribe as one who kindles the communal lantern. I will be waiting at the campfire's edge, eager to greet the traveler whose footsteps rhyme with mine. The return is not a retreat to the old coordinates, but a revelation that the world itself has a second, shimmering skin. You re-enter offices, subways, family rooms, yet everything pulses with an interior light you had previously overlooked. To live in the world without being of it is to handle objects as if they were metaphors, to hear dialogues as if they were hymns, to breathe as if each inhale were a vow. Solitude graduates into sovereign peace. Silence graduates into oracular clarity. Freedom reveals itself not as limitless choices, but as one luminous obligation to align every act with the truth you have found in the cave. Masks still hover at the edge of vision. Bonuses still tempt. Accolades still beckon, but their gravity has weakened. You may wear roles, worker, lover, citizen, but they are costumes donned consciously, never again fused to the skin. Some will misunderstand, accuse you of detachment or superiority, yet you will know that the distance they feel is the space required for them to hear their own call. Your presence becomes provocation, your calm a mirror, your laughter the echo of chambers they have yet to explore. This is not missionary zeal. It is the humble radiance of one who has drunk from the central spring and returned to point at the water. Campbell speaks of mastering the two worlds, of walking the marketplace with feet washed by the sacred river. You discover that emails can be written with reverence, that errands can be pilgrimages, that even sorrow can be cradled without resistance. The hero was never meant to escape life, but to embody it so fully that life itself widens. And in quiet moments you remember the first tremor, the crowded table, the hush inside your chest, and you smile because what once felt like disruption now glows as genesis. So the story closes, yet the journey continues, a spiral rather than a line, each revolution carrying you deeper into the marrow of being. If you ever doubt, place a hand on your heart. Feel the drum that has guided caravans across deserts of habit and oceans of fear. It is still beating, still composing the next stanza of the myth that is uniquely, unrepeatably yours.